This is Guys Read Romance, where I, romance author Margot Radcliffe, politely strong-arm my male friends into reading and chatting about romance novels with me for an uncomfortably long period of time. On the podcast today is my old friend Kevin, a fellow proud West Virginian. Kevin has a doctorate in education, is that right? And has sadly lived in all over Asia for the past decade. So I feel very lucky to see him electronically today. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Thanks. Yes, my doctorate is in education, so well done there.
Did I miss anything important? I got West Virginia.
West Virginia is probably the most important piece. So you got it all. Oh, and I'm married. That's important.
Right? Married to my also dear friend, Matt. All right. So welcome again. And so we are talking about The Beautiful Things Shoppe by Philip William Stover. But before we get started with that, tell us a little bit more about like what you read, if you write, kind of the last book you read. Give us an idea of.
All right. So what I read, mostly emails. For sure, that is the largest content I consume. And the other stuff is equally less exciting. I read a lot of research articles, education journals, all stuff that's related to my degree. I'm not good at pleasure reading at all. In fact, I feel guilty. I think if I have time to read, then I should be learning something for work.
That's funny. All right. And so that's pretty heavy stuff. And you kind of touched on this. So why haven't you read romance in the past?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. I have, and in fact, on my table right now, I have a mound of articles I want to read, and I have them stashed all over my house. So whenever I'm going on a plane or anything like that, my secret thing is just to grab a handful and try to do it on the plane or at the beach or wherever I am at this downtime. That I think just getting it cleared off my plate is actually my best mental health strategy. So I just haven't read because I just feel guilty for reading for pleasure. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Well, do you think up until the last couple of years, not a lot of gay romance existed up until recently? So, I mean, do you think if it had been available to you, like growing up, you would have read more of it?
Probably, like especially growing up in West Virginia, there was probably, and where I'm from in West Virginia, which is really rural, there was zero content. I can tell you that. And even now, I can say, in fact, to be fair to West Virginia, there wasn't much book access, just to say that. And if there was book access, it wasn't gay romance, I can tell you. And again, not knocking West Virginia. I love that place, but there just wasn't a lot of literature. It wasn't a literature-rich environment.
Sure.
But to even now, like if I was walking through an airport or something and I saw a gay romance novel featured, I probably would pick it up and read it. So yeah, I think if it was more accessible and more convenient, then I probably would do it. And I know it's out there on the internet. I'm not a big digital reader. I like the old school book. I like to see the progress. I like to bend the pages down. So right. I think that also is kind of less. It's ironic because there's more gay romance, but there's less access to the actual books.
Yeah. All right. Okay, great. I'm sorry you don't read more for pleasure. Well, let's get into this book. Well, the first thing we're going to do is play a game just to kind of loosen things up. Not that we're stiff people, but
I like that you loosen things up.
Yes. It's a very loose podcast. Oh God. All right. So this game is, do you believe that this sex scene is written by a man or a woman? All right. Are you ready?
I am ready. It's just guess. I have 50-50.
Yep. It's 50-50. All right. My head thudded against the glass, heat pulsing through my blood from the point where his tongue was driving me mad. My leg flexed against his back, urging him closer. My hands cupping his head to hold him still as I rocked into him. Feeling the rough satin strands of his hair against my sensitive inner thighs was its own provocation, heightening my awareness of everything around me. You're blushing, and it's funny. All right. Not that anybody can see that, but So red. All right, that's the first one, and this is the second one. As she brought my penis to life, I looked down at her strong back, at the junction between the contours of her shoulders, demarked by the straps of her brassiere, and the elaborately decorated instrument panel of this American car, between her thick buttock in my left hand and the pastel-shaded binnacles of the clock and the speedometer. Encouraged by these hooded dials, my left ring finger moved toward her anus. Do you want to guess which one is which?
Oh, so I do know one's man and one's woman.
Yes.
Is the first one a woman and the second one a man?
Yes. Good job. The first one was Bared to You by Sylvia Day. I would call her an erotic romance author. And then the second one is J.G. Ballard in the book Crash. And interesting stuff there. Not to say that there's any difference between, male and female, but,
Not to say there's a difference, but I did guess them right, just putting it on
there. You did guess
well,
them
the
right.
thing that threw me off, the second one sounded more like a male, except I was thrown off by the words anus and penis, just because that's very, I don't know, technical, I guess. And I was expecting maybe a bit more slang.
Yeah, well, I think that if in a different pairing, someone could have thought the first one was a man's. All right, good job. You win. Continued friendship.
What
All right, so this book is called The Beautiful Things Shoppe by William Stover. I'm going to do a quick summary just in case people don't know what it's about. Moving to eclectic New Hope, Pennsylvania, and running the Beautiful Things Shoppe is a dream come true for elegant and reserved fine arts dealer Prescott J. Henderson. He never agreed to share the space with Danny Roman, an easygoing extrovert who collects retro toys and colorful knickknacks. And yet here they are, trapped together in the quaint shop as they scrambled to open in time for New Hope's charming winter festival. Danny has spent years leading with his heart instead of his head. The Beautiful Things Shoppe is his chance to ground himself and build something permanent and joyful. The last thing he needs is an uptight snob who doesn't appreciate his whimsy occupying half his shop. It's only when the two of New Hope's historic landmarks, each as different as Danny and Prescott, are threatened that a tentative alliance forms, and with that, the first blush of romance. Suddenly, running the Beautiful Things Shoppe together doesn't seem so bad, until Danny's secret threatens to ruin it all. So that is the summary of the book. It is by Philip William Stover. I don't know why I keep calling him William K., but I do in my head all the time. But really quickly about him, the author has an MFA in Take It to Me in writing. He used to ghostwrite for a popular women's fiction author. He's currently a professor at NYU. And his essays appeared in Newsday, and he's also a middle grade novelist. So he's done a lot of stuff before this romance thing. So pretty impressive.
It is impressive. It's going to make me feel bad if I have disagreements about something, especially if he's listening. Hi, if you're listening.
We'll edit the bad things out. Yeah, you don't feel bad about disagreeing. So first question. So tell me, what were your first impressions of the cover, the blurb? Tell me some of the feelings you kind of had before you actually started reading the book.
I guess, so the cover, it's interesting you asked that because I remember it being cluttered. It's like a building with a window looking inside. There's stuff, there's chairs, there's words everywhere. So I remember just being like, okay, all right. The blurb, the blurb pulled me in. My dream is to find New Hope. I think that's the name of the town, right? New Hope, Pennsylvania. Yeah. I want to find that town and I want to live there. I'm a Hallmark movie person. I was pulled in because my dream is to find a small town and live in it someday. And the Pennsylvania piece is nice. That's where my husband's from. So that's an extra connection. And I like antiques. So the blurb itself was drawn in pretty cool. And then ironically, a connection I just made, we have a mutual friend who's involved in an antique shop. So there's a lot of personal connections there.
Yeah. And Matt I actually lent him an advanced reader copy of the first book in this series, which I didn't realize. So he read the first one. And so, and we'll talk about that later, the town and the kind of idyllic nature of it and like the found family aspect of this book, which I think is probably what was the best part about it for me. And so, yeah. And do you think did it deliver on the summary for you as you read it?
Yeah, no, I thought the summary was great. Maybe too much information, right? Because I feel like it gave away a little bit. But I think we all knew where the story was going, so I guess that's just part of the
Sure.
genre.
Yeah, of course. In romance, it has to have a happily ever after, right? That's the hallmark of the genre. I hope that you watched the Christmas Countdown. That's everybody's talking about that for the Hallmark movies. And what was I going? Oh, there was a point I wanted to make. Oh crap, I forget. Anyway, all right. Moving on. Second question: how did you feel about then the characters? Did you think they portrayed people you might meet in your regular life?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely anyone I think of or know, I could pull some characters from either some characteristics from either character. So they certainly did. I felt that the characters were a bit like they were really defined, like into boxes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Prescott, I think was his name, and Danny. You could predict what each one was going to do because their characters were so defined. I related personally to a little bit of both of them in the sense that, like, I hope that I'm approachable and a funny person and I get that feedback, but I'm also like such a perfectionist at work and I also
Uh-huh.
get that feedback too. So I guess again, I pulled from a little bit of both characters, and I don't. It's not a criticism, I don't think, but it's just that they were so predictable, the two characters.
Sure. Well, and I think that he really, first of all, the thing I wanted to say earlier before I forget is that in recommending this or putting this on the list of books, committed the cardinal sin that, along with the happily ever after, one of the big things that we're looking for in romance is sex. And I shared this book and there is no sex in it. And so I feel like I dropped the ball on romance writing. So I apologize. It will not happen again. But that was my disappointment as I read the book, and you had read it before I finished it, so I even knew going in that was not part of it. So sorry again. But
No
anyway,
worries. I because I haven't really read gay romance, so I was
uh-huh.
going into this and I had so many, and maybe this is a question for later. We're off topic, but like I had so many thoughts, like, oh my gosh, can I read this? Because we'd flown back home and we were doing quarantine, and I was like, well, can I read this? What if someone sees what I'm reading? Yeah, the sex never was there, which was fine. I didn't need it. It was just like I had, I guess, anticipated it would be there, and it wasn't. But it's fine without it. Just a surprise.
I guess an unpleasant surprise. Anyway, but we'll talk about some things that did happen later because I have questions. All right, so yeah, move it back to the characters. Yeah, I did feel like, but that's typical of romance. People fall into very common stereotypes, and that's part of the enjoyment is that you can predict it, right? Like that's part of what romance is. Like we know, like we said, we know what's going to happen. We're just enjoying the journey there, right? So definitely the characters felt a little I guess what you're hoping for at this point when you read gay characters is like a little bit more nuance for sure. And I did feel like they were kind of typical, like, gay characters that you would see on a sitcom almost. So that in that aspect, I can see where it would be like, oh, can we have just a little bit more, shading here with people? You know what I mean? I guess that's kind of what you're trying to say.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like maybe see some characteristics that didn't fit exactly into the profile. Did that
Sure.
that box that they were in.
Yeah, and just more well rounded, and it did to me like I've read thousands of romance novels, and there are these archetypes for women and whatnot, and so I guess I was hoping when reading about two guys that it would be a little bit that they have a little bit more nuance, and I guess I guess they didn't really. But it was still enjoyable. They were still fun. And I have to say that by the end, I liked them both much more than I did at the beginning. Because at the beginning, it took me a minute to like, it's like, all right, Prescott, we get it. You like things that are expensive. We get it.
Yeah, but I think maybe part of the author, because I agree with you. I didn't like either one. I didn't like either one of them because they were so far in their areas, right? Danny was a bit
Right.
aloof, and Prescott was like just
Mm-hmm.
pedantic. But in the end, I think maybe this is part of the author's goal is like they kind of merged a little bit of those behaviors and you started to
Sure.
see, I remember there being a quote in the book about, I think, Danny seeing Prescott in his house or something and being able to see a different lens of him. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
great. I wanted more of that earlier in the book, I think.
Yeah. And I just found some of the things to be just like I said before, a little stereotype, like the iron khakis at one point. And actually, this is a quote I wrote down: "Iron khakis, the firmer the crease," which I thought was funny thing to to have read. Talking about his butt, obviously. Which I have a lot of quotes written down here that I thought were fun, but I thought a lot of the dialogue seemed a little stilted, you know what I mean, and not how people would talk normally. So anyway.
Can I jump in there? Because there was one quote that I wrote down that just I did an eye roll, and if the author's listening, my apologies. But I literally put the book down. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And can I read it? Is that all right? I guess
Yeah, yes, of course.
he said, this is from Prescott, the one that's real tight. I knew the area had a great deal of Queen Anne style from the latter part of the century, but this is the only building in the area with such exceptional Second Empire details. And I'm just like, who says that? Or maybe people say that, but not the quote I was thinking would come out of a gay romance novel. I mean, again, it speaks to the character, and maybe it's a highlight that Prescott's a bit. I don't know who it says, or maybe no, I don't even know if it's Prescott. It might be another character, but just I feel like I jumped back to some research articles or something. It wasn't the light, fluffy fun.
I found, yeah, there was a lot of like architecture and antique chat that I found uninteresting in detail, but at some point, I kind of appreciated it. I mean, that's too much, obviously, but like I appreciated that part of it just because I felt like at least it was researched, which I enjoy. So, but yeah, nobody would say that out loud. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's too much.
But now I just want to give a positive, right? This is the educator in me, right? So now I want to give a positive. But then there's also lines like, I'm a Swiss clock and he's a slot machine. I loved it. That's a great way of describing the two personalities. Like, you didn't need a lot of technical language there. You didn't explain it. You just showed it to me, right? Like, I can visualize
Yes.
that. I get that. So there were some really great one-liners in there too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I have a lot of those written down. But then there were things like the hula dancer that Prescott didn't like. Just a lot of like old references that just made it feel a little out of touch. The hula dancer, it looks like it just felt tired, like a tired description. We've heard that joke before. We've heard it countless times. So there were a lot of things to me like that.
Yeah, another example, maybe not quite as old, but he said there was a 30-minute argument over which way the toilet paper goes. And I'm like,
All
that's
right.
kind of been
Yeah.
played out a few times.
Yes,
Like,
for sure.
I get where you're going with that. Like, we're
Mhm.
arguing over these detail things, but it's like, eh.
And also, like, you're a terrorist if it's not on the upside. I mean, like, it's not.
Wait, hold on. What do you mean? Like, it's Coverfall.
Oh yeah, over.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
No,
right.
we are still friends. Thank you.
Right. I'm glad we worked that out. But yeah, at one point he says, I ordered, and right before I had to take an important call. And like, that's such a small example. Like, nobody says that out loud. They're not like, I have to take an important call. You know, and it's just like, no, but I gotta go answer the phone. Like, it just, I don't know. Stuff like that. But he also said Downton Crabby, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, glitter can save a lot of things, which I thought was a pretty great quote and accurate.
There was one. I'm trying to find it, and I wrote it down here somewhere. There was one that I absolutely loved, and I highlighted it. Oh, here it is. The truth is, Here's the quote. The truth is, I miss him terribly, and what's worse than missing someone who was seated a few feet away? Another
Oh,
great
yeah, that's
line.
nice. Uh-huh. Yeah, so there's a lot to like, and a lot to like about the characters, but it did take me a minute, and it seemed like all of that stuff, like all those references, and it kind of all happened in the beginning. So it just did take me a second. I think you felt the same way. So did you find overall the writing style compelling? Were you engaged after kind of getting into it? We kind of feel like we kind of touched on this a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't feel compelled like that. I had to go forward. I wasn't staying up to 2 o'clock in the morning to finish
Right.
this. But I thought it was light. It was comfortable. It was fun. I was happy to pick it up and pick off where I was. It was casual. It didn't take a lot of my, it wasn't reading an article and underlining and stop and processing. It was just an easy, light, fun read. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I thought I thought he did a good job from a romance perspective. Like it was clear that this was a person who had studied romance novels. I mean, he had the two. He had it was enemies to lovers trope, which is very super popular. He like just like it. There was a lot of symbolism, like the landmarks that were different and mirroring the two people who were different and the two sides of the shop that were different and blah blah blah. So it was just clearly a person who had thought about it and who had studied romance or read a lot of romance. So I appreciated that part of it, and I enjoyed pierogies. That was something that I enjoyed the pierogi making as a Polish person. I don't you don't often see that in books, so loved it. So what made you in the end want to keep reading or stop reading?
I think I was just curious the twists and turns that we would take. Again, I think as you mentioned, it sounds like in the genre we all have an happy ending, which might be has a different connotation than gay romance, but we all have a happy ending and life's great. And I think that was clear. I just was curious to know. I mean, I predicted there'd be some misunderstandings, there'd be some tension points, and
Sure.
just like what they were going to craft those and the connections they would make. And then just again, it was an easy read. It was a feel good read, right? Things are going to work out.
Yes, they always work out. Like I said, again, it took me. It was probably like 30%. That's the percent, well, like where I was in the book, where I wasn't making myself read it. But once I got to that point, it was fun. So, like I said before, this uses the very popular trope of enemies to lovers. Did you enjoy that? How do you feel about that trope in general?
I think in general, I like it. I think the line between like hate and love can, the emotions, the feelings, it can get blurry. So I like it. And this story, and this is maybe my own personal baggage or whatever. I did find it a bit problematic in the sense, and my memory I might not be remembering this correctly, but if I remember right, Prescott came from like humble means, and
Right.
Danny obviously is like wealthier
Mhm.
than everyone. He's very
Right.
very wealthy. And for me, I grew up with, I would say, humble means. Didn't have
Mhm.
much, and now I find myself working with incredibly not me, but working along
Mhm.
or with people who are incredibly wealthy. And I feel like for me to be successful in my career, I kind of had to learn what middle class meant. I had to
Right.
learn, and now that I'm working in this a different ball game altogether, like trying to learn some of the behaviors and characteristics of the super wealthy. And I just feel like the two would never be able to mix. There's just so many deeply rooted cultural differences growing up in
Uh-huh.
poverty, growing up poor, growing up
Right.
in a broken homes or whatever the thing, the challenge, and growing up extremely wealthy. Like I just feel, even in meetings, I'll be explaining like, well, I think and I'll be trying to represent two different points of view. And I feel like personally for me, that was never addressed in the book. Like
Right.
how difficult it would be, just what they valued, the emphasis and importance of value would be so large. So I found that piece problematic. And again, maybe it's me bringing in some of that Appalachian baggage or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, that's the part that I couldn't get past. But it didn't mean I didn't like the book. I was just like, this is a fairy tale.
That's really interesting that like kind of tripped you up, that you couldn't immerse yourself in like, what if this could happen? What if I, I like ran in an antique shop with this super wealthy man, and then we, got married, and I lived as a chocolate heir forever. I don't think that I would ever consider, oh well, are we going to talk about how to talk to the butler? You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't, I wouldn't even consider that. So that's interesting that like you were grounded in reality for that.
Well, I think for me, the major difference is like this is old money, right? So Danny's like
Yeah.
generationally wealthy person. He would have grown up with such a different world than perhaps the other character would have. And I think like if it was new money, like someone's won the lottery and they run into this person, I think
Sure.
that would be a different story. But I do, or maybe those concerns could have been explored more. Like, but the book was about Danny hiding who he was. But
Right.
I think there would have still been elements of Danny's upbringing that he wouldn't have shaken off. That would have been a bit of a conflict in the relationship. But again, I take full responsibility for going a bit too deep into that one, maybe.
Well, I think that his dad was it wasn't right. It wasn't his grandfather. It was his dad that created the business. Am
I
I?
thought it was grandfather, but I don't
You might
remember.
be right. You
And
might
if
be right.
and if the author's like, no, this is you're wrong, because I fully would take those points on, but for some reason it got stuck in my head and I couldn't get it out.
Well, I found the chocolate thing boring. I found it like a weird choice. Why are you? It just I don't. A chocolate air felt less powerful. Like it felt like, I don't know. It took away some of the like romance of a billionaire for me. Like for the money to be in chocolate. I don't know why. I'm sure like Hershey family is just, they're jerks and terrible people, like probably. But for some reason, it just feels, I don't know. It just felt playful to me, the chocolate part of it.
Well, maybe it was just a play on Hershey. This is New Hope, Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
located right beside Hershey. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. New Hope, it can't be a real place. If so, that's such a convenient name for the story and the plot, right? New Hope. I just assumed it was made.
So a big component, and we kind of touched on this earlier, but I do think that was an interesting point, and one I just would never. I mean, the whole rich guy thing in the lower class, or like just the poor girl thing, it's just like it's so commonplace. Like I don't even think about.
Oh, so is that a common theme that you see in romance novels?
Oh, for high, of
Oh,
course,
so
of
I don't know
course.
that. I was thinking, and again, like as in the world of education, we study poverty researchers like Ruby Payne. We talk a lot about what characteristics and things you might see. In fact, I've even this was a bit of a moment for me. Is Matt, my husband, was going to some training workshop, and one of the presenters, I was like, "Oh, that name sounds very familiar to me," and then it ended up being it was one of my counselors, like guidance counselors when I was growing up. And
Oh
in
wow.
her bio, she'd even talked about how she had dedicated her life to supporting the poor in Appalachia, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that was me. I'm so sorry that she had to take, this much of her time. But like again, like I think in the world of education, we think so much about motives and motivations behind behavior, so we understand how to address things. And I kept thinking about it through that lens, and just again having worked in Title I schools in the United States, and then now working with famous politicians and wealthy billionaire people, there's definitely different ways that I go into those meetings, and different approaches and different things that I say and do, and different things that I know they're going to want from me. So I guess I just was looking for some of that in the book, or some of those.
Right.
Maybe that could have been the tension points. Not that he's hiding the money, but
Right.
how that makes you act differently.
Right. Just an acknowledgement that they're different, right? Like, because we did touch a lot on how Prescott's upbringing influenced what he did and who he was, but there was not a lot on Danny's part. Like, we're just, he's just a jolly fellow, is what we're kind of,
He's a
is what
jolly
we
fellow
painted
pretending he
as.
doesn't have money because he wants to live on his own and be successful.
Right.
Yeah.
And he wants someone to love him for who he is and not his money. Okay, so we talked about this before. A big component of this book is found family, and New Hope is kind of an idyllic town of acceptance. Clearly this idea resonated with you, and do you think how did it add to the romance of it all to you?
I love the town and the townspeople. I want to read more, and I think the first book is about the end, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
So I guess in that sense, I want to. If it was a real place, I would want to do a road trip, right? So I thought the backdrop of the story really helped a lot. I love the snow scene. I think that's because I haven't had seasons for many years, but I love the snow. I thought again, going back to like Hallmark Christmas movie, I was spot on.
Oh
I
yeah.
thought the author did an amazing job painting the picture of the town.
I thought here's a quote that I loved on the corner of quaint and queer. I thought that was cute. And yes, that snow scene with the sledding was beautiful and I loved it. And one of the things that he wrote that I got caught on was Danny's smile is radiant like the stars that are beginning to twinkle in the lavender sky. I thought that was so romance novel and I appreciated it on just like on a cute just sappy kind of level. But in that scene, I thought it was lovely.
Yeah, I also remember that, and I was like, "Oh, it's cute" in this context. But again, this is my first gay romance novel, so I'm
Right,
still learning.
right. But yeah, I like. I mean, I don't think that there were any. I mean, I don't think if there were straight characters in this book, I don't remember them. Maybe the pierogi lady.
Oh yeah, maybe the church people.
Yeah.
I quite like the church scene as well, which you've referenced,
Oh yeah, the
because
pierogi.
that was the best way that I got to know Danny.
Right. Yeah. And I just thought it was something you don't see even in like regular romance where, it's trying to be more inclusive. But it's certainly nothing like this where the whole town was just kind of a found family. I thought it was nice and it really added to it for me. I thought the town itself was an interesting part of the story and possibly, honestly, the most interesting part for me. I loved Arthur, the original owner of the store. I like the townspeople scenes when they're arguing about the historic landmarks or whatever. I kind of found myself liking those parts more than the parts with Danny and Prescott, honestly. And the ones with who was the chef and the owner of the inn, and they had the kids, and I was like, maybe I should read this book. It sounded nice.
And I would agree. The town and the characters were maybe more important to me than I would have anticipated. The other thing that you just reminded me of, and I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? Like the symbolism behind Prescott living on the other side of the river, because was it a different town on the other side? Because wasn't he always walking across the bridge?
Oh, I didn't even pick up on that. But sure, of course, that's because he never fit in, right? It took him a while to fit in with people. He had a hard time. So that makes sense. I didn't pick up if he was in a different town or not, if it was the same town just over the bridge. Either way, it works that
The
he's
other
separate
thing
from.
where I connect to Prescott on is I couldn't quite picture what the bank, I think it was, looked like, but I already
Yeah.
know I agreed with Prescott and I didn't like
I have to admit, like, I don't care about buildings. I was like, just tear them down. Like, who cares?
Oh no! See, I did like the building, but it just sounded a bit like it didn't match the town in my head. That building didn't match either. But
Yeah, it was weird. But I really like convenient parking. And so I was like, just tear it down. I don't want to have to. I don't want to have to parallel park somewhere. Can you just put a parking structure here, please? It's fine. That's how I felt about it. But also, I did. That's touching on another thing that I disliked was that guy. I didn't think we needed him. That like weird rich man that was used to date Prescott or whatever. He was like clearly a villain and like the world's like most stereotypical awful villain. Like I just didn't think we needed him.
he served the purpose of creating the misunderstanding, right? He created the purpose of these tension point things. But I agree. I wish he wasn't my friend. But I don't know if we were meant to like him. I guess the
No,
question.
no, obviously we weren't, but like he was not, he was just like in and out. And so if you want me to believe that like something is a problem, I need to be like invested. Like I need to believe that this would possibly happen. Like I don't, like I just didn't believe he was a real person. He felt like a cheap tool and I didn't like it. But I couldn't. I had a hard time. I kept picturing the bank as like a Michelin man. You know what I mean? Like curvy, like tires. But it was a weird description.
I have no idea what the bank looked like, but I was with Prescott. I didn't like it either.
All right. Okay. Moving on. Did you find the sexual components realistic?
I didn't find the sexual components.
Well, no, they like made out. And then this is my question. There was a lot of like nipple description and action. And I was like, I wasn't aware that like nipples were like such a huge thing for guys. And like that went on like for quite some time. And they both seemed to really enjoy that. And I was like, I'm just not aware of this. And so, but other than that, they kissed on the bench. Like all the way they thought about each other sexually, did that all read authentic to you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the nipple thing. Yep, that's up there. That's check. The thinking. I don't remember a lot about it. I remember. I think it was a making pasta, and Danny didn't like pasta in his house. I feel like there was some thoughts, internal dialogue there, but I guess I did. None of it made me pause and wonder, so it did its job, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That part went through the filter. No hesitation. No note taking.
Good. Okay, so did the relationship between the two main characters feel, and I guess we can bring that out to like the other characters as well. Did the relationships in general in the book seem, authentic to you?
Like with the two main or all the characters with each other?
Well, we can start with the two main ones, but then we can chat
Yeah,
about the other ones as well.
I think yes. I feel like the obstacles they overcame and the personalities of the two main characters very authentic. My hang up still goes back to some of the background piece, but given what we were shown in the book and what we were told about the characters, yes, it seemed authentic. I felt like they learned enough about each other, and you see that in the merging of the two sides of the antique shop. And yeah, I liked everything that was presented. I thought was authentic feel.
Okay. And the other characters, did you think the friendships seemed like believable?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
wish we had. Yeah, go ahead.
it felt like you were listening, and I love Hallmark movies. It was like you were reading a Hallmark movie, right? You have the
Sure.
cozy townspeople, and this is the coffee shop and the inn and like all the characters, and they get along, and everyone's a good, happy, friendly family.
Mhm.
It's the idyllic dream. It's what everyone wants. So yeah, I liked the characters. I liked the interactions, the relationships.
It did make me hungry sometimes. They were always getting stuff from that bakery, and I was like, "Can we quit with this?" Just like, how many different scones do you have to describe to me? Come on. Yeah, and those friendships seemed authentic to me. Like the friendships between the townspeople. I did 100% get Prescott's awkwardness with other people. And that actually was one of the things I did like to see was over the course of it, him kind of being more comfortable with people. That was really sweet to see him kind of open up and form those friendships and in general just become more likable. I thought, we didn't really see that same kind of arc with Danny so much. Like we were supposed to like him from the beginning and like he kind of I guess learned to be honest, but like we didn't really see kind of that same arc as we did with Prescott, I guess. And so that was a small bummer, I guess.
Yeah, I agree 100%. What was his transition? I think it's because he was already living the transition. He was already this wealthy person that had decided I'm going to hide it and be this other person. So he didn't have much room, whereas
Right.
Prescott had a bit more change. I end up really. I think at the end of the day, if you have to be friends with one, which one would it be? I think it would have been Prescott from the beginning, you know?
I don't like people who collect. Here's my problem. I don't love people who collect things generally. Like people that have obsessions with a specific thing they collect, I think are creepy. So like I appreciate that they have this shop, but like generally, and like that's maybe an inflammatory thing to say, but like people who collect like salt shaker. I mean, like, look, I'm not gonna collection shame anybody right now, but I just don't get it. I don't know why you want to have a lot of a certain, like, I don't get it.
Well, he addresses this. This is a quote in there. It's something about a cookie jar, and it was something like it was a turning point for Prescott or someone. There was a quote that's about it's important to him, right? Like it's a moment where Prescott starts to see, I love that cookie jar, and that's what made it special. Okay, that's when Danny is saying it, but he talks about his obsession with some of these.
Yeah, and there was a quote he wrote, "Priceless Smurfs," which I thought was funny. And like, Smurfs are featuring too heavily in romance novels. I'm just gonna say it out loud. There's a lot of references to, and I don't like. It's just old. They're old. Smurfs are. Who thinks about Smurfs anymore? And why am I still collecting Smurfs? I mean, like, it's over, guys. Let the Smurfs go. I don't get it. But.
Well, it's interesting because I also had a pretty strong response about Smurfs, but in a different way.
Oh, you like the Smurfs?
Well, but no. Okay, I again grew up limited TV. We had like 3 channels on a good
Sure.
day, right? So
Yes.
limited radio stations. I know what a Smurf is. Okay. But in this, it's like here's the quote. Danny is setting up a collection of what looks like plastic blue mice that live in some kind of a red plastic mice. Who doesn't know what a Smurf is? Honestly, like again, it's one of those things where it's like I get he's trying to show the separation.
Sure.
Use a charcuterie board or something. He's not going to know what that is, maybe, but a Smurf, like people know what Smurfs are. I know what a Smurf. I've never seen like E.T. or any of those movies, but I know what a Smurf is.
That's funny. I just remember that. Yeah, it's like Prescott to some degree like was like an alien. He just didn't like he'd never spoken to people. Like he didn't know what Smurfs were. Like it was all right. He didn't talk like I said before. Like, nobody would say the sentences out loud that he said. You know what I mean? Like it was just very. But it worked, right? Because by the end, he was a normal person who found out what Smurfs were. That's funny. Anyway, I thought it was fine. I was glad to have read it. I thought he did a good job. Like I said before, I think it was obvious that this guy kind of studied romance novels. He really hit all the beats hard, like the conflict and the enemies to lovers and the different kind of contrasting characters. So he got all of it. I just sometimes it felt a little rote to me, but like I said, there had a lot of redeeming things, like the sledding.
In the town.
Yeah.
Hey, it was in the top 1% of romance books I've ever read.
There you go. There you go.
No, I liked it. It was feel good. And honestly, if I see the other book, I probably would read it.
Well, Matt has the other book, the first one. I think he has it on his whatever he reads on. All right. So we've got any other thoughts about this book before we go to another game here and then we wrap up?
No, that's it. My final thought is it's good. I would recommend it. It's a lovely, again, if you're, for me, when I do read for pleasure, it's on vacation or something light, right? It's a perfect book for that.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like it was like and it doesn't have to be, that's not his job, but did you feel like it represented you in a way that like realistic gay romance to you? Like this is a whole world, a whole relationship that like I could see myself having, or I could slip into one of these characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my favorite thing about it is being gay wasn't a thing, right? It wasn't a thing. And a connection you just gave me was that church, which is sometimes a place that gay people don't feel as welcomed. And that was one of my favorite scenes. Now, I think it was one of my favorite scenes because I got to see Danny from a different angle, but maybe it's also because it was a different angle in a church where being gay wasn't a topic. and people were quite supportive. And to an earlier thing you had said, maybe some thing to do in the next book would be to bring in some straight characters, because the townspeople were mostly LGBTQ plus type people, but showing that, like, for young people who might be out there, like, hey, being gay is like, it's not a thing as much, like maybe my generation was. It's just, that's part of who you are, and we're not even going to talk about it because it's so ingrained or mixed in or integrated, whatever, accepted into society.
Well, I did find that I was kind of waiting for them to talk about it. And they did touch a little bit about childhood was hard and they were bullied. And that was but that was a very small part of it. And it was clear to the reader, I think, that they had kind of dealt with it. Maybe it shaped them in ways that we didn't see on the page, but they were themselves in spite of what happened. But yeah, it wasn't the conversation, right?
Well, one of the most challenging things I find as a gay person, and again, a different generation perhaps, but you always have to come out when you go to a new job, or when you go to a new town, or you go to a restaurant, or you're checking into a hotel. But there's always this moment of where you're kind of like, oh, they're a gay couple or whatever. What I liked about the book is it took that away. Like, being gay was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, great. Oh, you got a perm. Okay, great. What? You know what I mean? It was like, so it makes that, like, coming out less awkward. And I think that's the world that I would hope that we could get to everywhere someday.
Right. I think that just culturally, I think that's what we're in the middle of, right? Maybe that's not how you feel, but I guess.
Well, I mean, I think I'm indifferent. I've lived outside the U.S. for a quarter of my life, so I'm not quite sure.
Are you not following Little Nas X?
I know who that is. Doesn't quite fit into my genre of music.
I think that you would like it. You need to listen to it right now. All right. Well, okay. Good talk about this book. We recommend it. You're going to read the first one. And we've got another game here, and this one is, can you guess whether these passages are from a romance novel or classic, just literature in general? Not necessarily classic, but like literary or classic literature. All right, you ready?
Maybe.
All right, he stepped down, trying not to look long at her, as if she were the sun, yet he saw her like the sun, even without looking, right? This is the second one. It was a kiss made in lonely dreams, a kiss that took its time, a kiss that felt so right she couldn't remember all the reasons it was wrong.
I think the first one is classic.
Yep.
Is the second one then by default gay romance?
Yes.
Okay. That would have been my thought. Man, I hope you're grading the other people, because I got 100.
Yeah.
No, here's the thing. What I liked about the classic one was comparing it to nature. That was my giveaway.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, the first one was Anna Karenina, by the way, which is most notably the book that made me stop reading classic literature and read romance, because I was so sick of the women dying in class. If you read any like classic novel, it's like they all die, and this is not a secret. Like they always die, and I'm sick. I was just sick of it. I remember being in high school and like just being like, what the fuck? I'm done with this. I want somebody to live. Anyway, and then the second one
was... Well, now that you've ruined classical literature for me, I can't wait for the second one.
Like, hey, listen, maybe you like women dying. I don't know.
I have no comment for that statement. Of course not. But sometimes it's not a happy ending, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, never time. No time is for happy ending.
Men should be dying equally. I mean, in proportion in classic literature, if that's the problem.
You were breaking up, so I didn't hear exactly what you said. But that happens in all classic literature because men are terrible, except for you. Sorry.
Just saying you're terrible.
Left to your own devices, men are terrible. I'm kidding. Obviously, that's not true. And the second one was This Heart of Mine by Susan Elizabeth Phillips. And she's a very big romancer and also thinks that men kill women in books a lot. So, all right. So the last couple of things to wrap up here. Were the assumptions you've previously made about romance and romance books proven true after reading this book?
Yes and no. I yes, in that sense, I always thought they were going to be light and moving along. That was
Mhm.
true. And it kind of was nice to just read along and yeah. And no, in the sense that I thought that I was going to be blushing more. I thought that I was going to be embarrassed and looking over my
Oh,
shoulder to see if someone was seeing what I was reading. And so that was not the case. But again, also okay.
well, but were you on an e-reader? How are they? They would really have to be like craning their necks to like look at what was on your
I know, but
screen.
I think, I think just even if I was on a bus or sitting beside someone and was reading a sex scene, I'm just really, I guess, old school. I think I would be so embarrassed that somehow they knew what I was doing that I'd have to walk away. You know what I mean? Like I was expecting to be embarrassed and like,
Right.
oh my gosh, like I can't, like I was
Mhm.
doing something wrong, which is probably unearthing some deeply rooted social, psychological concerns that I should talk through. But I wasn't. I didn't feel awkward. I don't think at all.
Well, we're gonna make sure the next one has some boning in it for sure. So read it at home. Read it at home. But I remember your husband Matt. One time we were all on vacation at the beach. He was reading 50 Shades of Grey, and even on the beach, like where there was not anybody really around, I felt like he was like trying to cover the book. That was like the first book that people like were reading all over, right? And like trying to cover it up so people didn't see what they were reading. It's funny.
I actually read the first like chapter on that beach trip. I think of 50 Shades of Grey. But after the beach trip ended, so did the book.
Well, maybe you can revisit it now. After this experience, do you think that you will read or watch more romance on your own?
Um, well, by watching romance, I mean if there's like a recommended movie on Amazon, sure. But reading, yeah, I'm not opposed to it. Again, like to what we'd said there earlier, if I was walking through a mall or an airport or something,
Mhm.
and you could tell that at a glance that it was like a gay themed book, I would pick it up and read it
Mhm.
just because it is nice to relate or to read about the community. I
Mhm.
just don't actively seek it out, which is unfortunate in modern age when we have less and less printed books.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think we have the same amount of printed books. I think that there's just now more digital books, and the books that for different audiences, I think are thriving more in the digital space. I mean, you can find romance novels literally about anything at this point. I mean, monsters. I mean, like I read a book about minotaurs, and it was the dirtiest book I've ever read in my life. So I mean, there's anything that you can find online now. I mean, it's kind of nice, and you don't have to worry about somebody seeing what you're reading. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you want to say before we end here?
No, I think I'm good. Yeah, it was a good conversation. I feel like I've engaged deeper into the book than I had when I read it. They should do this often. They should call it like book clubs or something. It'd be a great idea where people could just sit around and talk about their readings.
Yeah, yeah, you would think that somebody would have thought of that already.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
You're a genius. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for reading the book. I know you're clearly busy with all of those emails, so I know that it took a chunk of your time. So I do appreciate it. Yeah, I think it was great. And this was only my second or third gay romance to read. So I really not unexpectedly, but I enjoyed it for sure. And it did make me want. I don't watch Hallmark movies, but it did kind of make me want to watch a Christmas Hallmark movie. That's kind of how I felt when I was reading it. So yay.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, that's it. Now tell me that you love romance.
I love romance.